Welcome everybody. This is Denny and Karl with GetWisdom, and today we're going to continue with our channeling series. And we have a special one today, which is part of the channeling series. But today we have viewer questions for Creator, and we've done a number of these. And we actually pick from a pool of questions that our viewers send in, so Karl can ask these questions of Creator. And we've done some. We've had these are like a favorite for us in some ways because we get to cover a lot of ground and also, serve directly our followers, all of you, our supporters, and our participant members at Get Wisdom, and everyone else who gets to see this video. So I want to thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Karl, especially for doing this with us. And maybe we can have a little discussion beforehand before we get started with the channeling. So thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Denny. Thanks to all of you watching. We appreciate your participation here. It's why we do this. We're not just serving ourselves. We hope to reach as many people as possible with our broad messages of the reality of the divine and that healing help is available. We've been given powerful tools to make things better than ever before in the history of humanity, both in learning how to pray more effectively, as well as making precise, high-level, informed healing requests of the divine for the kinds of services they can provide and the way they go about healing us. Having that insight really empowers a request for help like never before. And this has been a learning curve. So while we've been ignorant, prayers even have had modest benefit because we've often been praying for the wrong things, praying in the wrong way, and so on. So I don't want to get off on a big tutorial here. But the point is the communication. That is what's so important to having a partnership with the divine. So in its way, this channeling session today will be forming a partnership for the purposes of conveying information, at least. But one can get much more in requesting action on the part of the divine. So if nothing else that you might take away from this, it's that God is listening and you can always say something or ask for something of benefit to yourself or others, and you will be heard. The fact that I get answers is a special gift that I'm able to do this channeling and being open in a certain special way in my subconscious to receive the communication very, very clearly. Few people are able to get that sort of direct feedback, but you can still get glimmers and kind of an inner feeling that you're being heard and that you're being touched by the divine in some way. It might be a physical feeling, an emotional reaction, just maybe a sense of an inner calm or peace when you were struggling and really confused and miserable before you started with your little talk with God. And so this is how the divine realm works. And I did want to say a few things about posing questions to the divine, because there's important considerations in how you go about it. There's limitations in what the divine can even tell us. And it's part of the overall structure of the rules of engagement. We are supposed to be in charge of our world. And this is a gift. It's a problematic gift many times as we struggle under that burden, largely of ignorance, because we don't really know that that's going on for the most part. Most people don't. They might feel helpless and lost, but they don't realize God is expecting them to be in charge and take charge and learn how to go about doing it well. And so that's all we need is another burden, right? I can feel the cringing out there. Oh no, we got to do something now. And people look to God for answers and guidance and real rescuing. And that's fine up to the point where you disempower yourself in turning over responsibility. So that's all I'm saying. We're supposed to be grown-ups and supposed to be functional. And the learning curve that we're on has been one of growing, reawakening an awareness of the reality of the divine. It's gotten besmirched. It's been corrupted. There's been disinformation creeping into the organized religions to darken it and to discourage people, to make people fear God, that it's a judgmental, angry kind of overlord that will smack us down if we make a misstep. And that kind of perspective is more than a wet blanket. It's a real barrier to belief and to engagement. And people get rusty then. They kind of drift away. And if you don't use muscles, they'll atrophy. And the same is true for prayer and an outreach. So we're careful in how we construct questions, because if we come with total ignorance about something, we might learn a little bit of additional knowledge, but we won't get the whole encyclopedia on those subjects. And that's because the burden is still on us to learn and grow. And so I have to go back to the well again and again, and I learn incrementally, because there is a proportionality for answers from the divine to the question. How informed is it? How accurate is it? Why is it being asked? And what will be done with the information? Will it be harmful to have the knowledge? Will it increase risk for people? Or could it be used against someone in an unwise way? So it's sort of like putting a loaded gun in the hands of a child. You wouldn't do that as a thinking adult, but information has power. And so there's those sort of considerations too, as well. What are people ready to hear? What have they earned, in a sense, the right to hear by being prepared, being knowledgeable, being in earnest, being sincere, having enough belief to enable a divine communication to come through in the first place, and all that sort of thing. So I've been climbing this hill myself, and it's a delight for me to share this with others. And I've asked many questions over the years that have come from other people, because I don't know everything, and I have certain interests that are sort of an innate bias of mine, my likes and dislikes and that sort of thing. But I always learn from every interchange. There's always something I'll hear in a little new way. I'll see it in a little different light. I'll maybe see a new facet of it I hadn't considered. And that is what's convinced me this is real, that it isn't me. Because I typically do not ask questions I know the answer to. Certainly not in any detail. Otherwise, I don't bother. I just move on to something else.
And that turns out also to be a problem with humans, because we make a lot of assumptions about things that we think we know.
Yes.
Or we assume that we know something when actually we don't. And that's been a big part of this whole adventure, is because we're still figuring out what the problem is. Yeah. We know we have misconceptions about the divine realm, but on the other side, on the evil side, we're still discovering, what's actually going on Earth? Who's running the show? What are their motivations and what are their powers? And that turns out to be, unfortunately, the darker side of all of this, because it's turning out. I just said this to someone this morning. We have to eat our dinner first before we get dessert. And it turns out dinner is a full course meal here. There's a lot of dark material that needs to be uncovered, so we know what to ask for. So we know what the problem is.
This is a big part of it.
Yeah.
It's like the way you treat a little child. You don't discuss adult themes and adult issues and problems with the child. They're not ready. Not only wouldn't they understand it, they might well be horrified and terrified about some of the realities that it represents, like death and people harming one another in horrific ways and so on. young children are naive and they need to be shielded from the harsh realities of life. And it's also true of us as adult humans that we can get in over our heads and we can be in a state of ignorance such that we can't be given access or privy to some information and understanding. We're not ready. We're not knowledgeable enough to even go there at all. And most of the world is asleep and in a kind of orchestrated complacency through mind control manipulation. Yeah. And that's another barrier to people being interested at all in things that might be controversial or unconventional.
Yeah, it's important to note that one of the biggest goals of mind control is just to create apathy.
Yes.
And nothing more sinister than that, because so much can be done when someone's apathetic. You can get, if someone, if your victim is apathetic, you can get away with, you could rob the whole store.
Yeah.
They won't care.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's hugely destructive for human progress because it just keeps everyone kind of limping along in a very mediocre way, in a very mediocre world that has all sorts of inconsistencies and unfairness and lack of progress.
Yeah, and lack of logic.
Really, yeah. Yeah, and there are examples that are quite egregious, but no two people will see that in the same way.
Yeah.
And it's always been remarkable to me how seemingly insensitive people are. But what that really is this orchestrated complacency. So it just doesn't impinge on their thoughts. It just sort of bounces off.
Right.
It's sort of like walking down the street and there's bodies everywhere and like you don't think anything of it.
Yeah, you're like stepping over a paper cup or something.
And that's an extreme example of a state of apathy or inability to engage intellectually or emotionally with a subject. But it happens routinely. And it makes it hard for the whistleblowers because, boy, do they look strange.
Yeah.
And it's not just that they're strange. What they're talking about isn't even worth thinking about to most people.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that's missing here, because normally people would look at a nice, juicy so-called conspiracy theory and say, boy, is that strange, but what if it's true? Maybe we ought to find out. Let's put this to bed so we can move on and not be thinking about it again and again and again and again.
And it's incredible how many times that never happens.
Exactly, yes.
It's amazing.
And yes, and it reinforces the mediocrity, the complacency. So the media won't even go there anymore.
Yeah.
You can't report paranormal phenomena to the news, they just have no interest whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because they have a mind lock not to go there.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk about spirituality. They don't want to talk about extraterrestrial phenomena.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk about paranormal phenomena like psychic ability and premonitions and ghosts and these sorts of things. It's on a forbidden list right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we come forward with our questions, we often probe those very things because there are areas of deep ignorance, and they're also areas of ignorance for a reason.
Yeah.
That they are very important clues about reality that are being suppressed.
Right. So
it's not just some fringe delusional preoccupation with the bizarre.
Right. Karl,
these are mainstream issues that affect each and every person when you get right down to it.
And every day in the whole, all of humanity. Yeah. So I want to talk about, before we start the channeling itself, I want to talk about that, how that issue applies to channeling, because I think it's a good opportunity to talk about that, since you're going to be channeling Creator today, which is probably a very for many people might be more unbelievable than what we normally do, which is channel deceased people. But I wanted just to roughly go over the questions that we're going to ask today. Before we do that, just in case you have any comments about that you'd like to mention to our viewers, since some of this stuff are topics that we've already covered in one way or the other, and there's things that we already know about some of these things. So I'm just going to briefly go over the 7 questions. I'm not going to read the questions, just briefly go over them in case there's something you want to make a comment on. If you want to interrupt me as I go, please do. So the first one's about the coronavirus, about chemtrails, and about what the mainstream media is doing. We have a question about that. That's the first question. And then we have a question about World War II and how it ended, why it ended, and the divine realm. What are the mandates from the divine, or not the mandates, but the suggestions from the divine realm as it relates to killing. And then the third question is about the idea that karma would be visited upon someone who is more enlightened, awake, and aligned with the divine realm as opposed to others. And then the fourth question, we're going to talk about the megalith discovery in Gornaya Shiraya in southern Siberia in Russia. And then we're going to talk about whistleblower claims that there's many off-planet human civilizations, some that are very large and trading with other ET species that we have not talked about yet at GetWisdom. Sixth question today is about the claim from the divine realm, from various sources, primarily Creator, that 10% of the babies born today are ET hybrids and or clones who do not have souls. And then the last question is about if the divine human experiment fails and it is done again, about what Creator might do differently on the third attempt. So those are the 7 questions that we've got today. And so if you have any comments about any of those, Karl, let's bring that up. We're probably going to get a full treatment in the answer of all of these questions, and then we can finish up with the idea with this talk about channeling and the whole idea that that's kind of a protected area insofar as the powers that be are concerned.
Yes, well, I can tell you categorically that I don't know the full story about any of those questions. I know some things about most of them. A couple of them I know nothing about whatsoever. I don't know anything about this archaeological dig in Siberia, was it?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, it's actually mountain structures.
It's what?
They're mountain structures. There's a claim from mainstream science these are actually natural geological formations, but when you see pictures of them, that kind of doesn't really fit what you're, the visual of it. You're like going, these look like huge carved stones, hundreds of tons, way up in the air, with openings and doorways and very strange configuration of what they're calling a megalith, megalithic structures.
Right. Yeah, I understand the terminology and that, but I didn't know about this particular one. But anyway, there's always more to be learned. And one thing that I've learned from answering questions of viewers is there'll be something new for me personally,
right?
In spite of all I know. And not to try to take credit, this is all divine information in my knowledge base that helps me to be fairly informed about many things that the average person isn't. But it's because I go to the well and I'm asking and I'm curious and I'm relentless about it. But that also helps me to be an ideal kind of springboard to go to the well, because if I'm asking, we're likely to get a little bit more detail than if someone never heard about any of this and then they sat down with Creator and asked.
Right.
Because again, it's a function of who is reaching out and what do they know and who are they. And
and I think a good example of that is this whistleblower question, this SSP whistleblower question about offshore human population or off-planet human populations and other ET species and all this kind of thing, and trading, interstellar trading and this kind of thing. I think that that's one where we're going to really reap the benefit of the fact that we have had a lot of information about what we call the MAP, Mercenary Army Program, and ETs involved with humans.
Yeah. Yeah, because one thing that happens in an exchange with the divine is they cannot lead you. So think about the implications of that.
Right.
They cannot just jump in and say, well, wait a minute, whoa, you're completely wrong about the whole premise here. This isn't real. This isn't happening. You've been misinformed. You've been told lies. Here's the truth. They can't do that. So you think, well, okay, what's the point? Well, the point is you're responsible. You go put the pieces together and ask penetrating questions and be open-minded when you come. And maybe the first thing might be, I've heard this scenario. Can you help me understand whether any or all of this might be true?
Right.
And what about it would be best for me to know at this point in time?
Yeah.
And this sort of thing. Be more scholarly and methodical and philosophical about it in the sense of seeking truth first and foremost.
Right.
And not so much a validation of your own prejudices and assumptions and so on. So that's the best you can do.
Right. So what's the big deal about channeling?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean that seems to be one of the big forbidden areas, and where there's a lot of misdirection, disinformation, a lot of manipulation. Our claim is that that most channelers are being are duped. So why is that? I mean, I want our viewers to hear that before we start.
Well, this is true. I've been told this for years. Ever since I first started channeling archangels, they would tell me, and I would talk about channeling and channelers and some points of discrepancy with what channelers were being told and what I'm hearing from the archangels, for example.
Okay.
And, I went with honest questions about wanting to know truth, you see. Not, what can I get the goods on with so-and-so about because they're a channeler I'm competing with and, with a personal kind of axe to grind or motivation for self-benefit and so on. And this is how I learned about this phenomenon. And as I came to learn more and more about the big picture that our world is being controlled with an iron hand from behind the scenes, it fits logically very perfectly in that broad scenario. Someone who is reaching out with their non-local consciousness, their intuitive reach, psychic powers, whatever you want to call it, is a potential danger to secret keepers because that psychic ability can go anywhere, anytime, and see things. So they have a vested interest in finding out who has psychic ability and then trying to get involved with them in a way that they can be an influence and misdirect them if possible to focus on things that are not really important and will keep them preoccupied. Mm-hmm. And so they do a hand-holding with as many channelers as they can to co-opt them and step forward as an imposter and pretend to be Archangel Michael or some other divine level being in many cases. So
let me play the devil's advocate a little bit. If that's the case, and channelers have been largely discredited in the overall, if you go up, talk to Joe and Mary Sixpack somewhere, and ask them about channelers, they're just kind of go, oh God, it's poo-poo. It's like a UFO sighting or something. Most people don't give any credence to channelers anyway. So why should they be considered a threat to the secret keepers?
Well, because they can come up with secret knowledge about things going on behind the scenes. This is what I do routinely. If I'm talking to a divine level being and I have a good reason to learn something I can become a danger to the powers that be because I'm onto them. I know their agenda in some detail, and I can blow the whistle. Now, I'm not a huge risk to them because I'm a relative unknown. I don't have a big platform where I can broadcast this to the masses in a credible way as yet. So it's a low level risk at worst for them. But if there were a whole chorus of channelers tuning into the divine and getting the truth, that would be much more impressive. So they engineer this so you have the opposite. The vast majority of channelers are focused on love, on sweetness and light messages, on a kind of a disempowerment that says, you're a light being. You can do anything you put your mind to. You don't need outside help. You can just focus on what you want and manifest it. And by the way, we're all going to ascend as part of this shift in consciousness, and we're all going to move into 5D. We're going to leave this physical business behind. You don't need to worry about any of it. It's going to heal all of us, and we're going to be great. And, it's coming soon, and there's nothing much you need to do. And what that does is it disempowers people to be complacent, thinking everything's taken care of.
Is it also true? Is it also true then that some information is withheld from you by the divine realm for the purpose of protecting you, so that if something did become public, that like some secret became public through your channeling, that it could be found out, and it would be viewed as confirmation that you are talking to something divine and therefore a threat, so that information is not going to come into your knowledge, primarily for the reason that if it did, it could endanger you. Is that true?
This is true. And occasionally I'm told that quite directly. It's not in your best interest to know this at this time. And often there are things that might be uncomfortable involving others.
Can you give us an example of that? Just for our viewers?
Like a public figure.
Okay.
We might channel someone who's been in the news who passes on, and then we go up to the light and ask them about their life and the things they were doing down here when they were in the living. And sometimes if they're too forthright about certain things, it might be a risk to their associates or family members who are still surviving. And so they won't be too forthright in talking about certain things that could compromise others they've been connected to. And this is true across the board, that if they reveal something that could end up harming someone in the living, that is a karmic transgression, meaning you have done something untoward that will be assigned to you as the cause agent. And what that means is the law of karma is going to find a way to make you pay. You will have something taken away from you. If you hurt someone, you'll have a hurt coming. This is built into the universe. It's not God sitting up there judging you, watching what you do and sending thunderbolts down and so on. It's in a sense, it's worse than that. It's part of the physics of the universe that energy will find its way to fill the vacuum you create by withdrawing love, denying love, or putting hatred into something.
Yeah, or creating a situation where there's opportunity for restitution.
Yes.
Because it's about balancing the energies, basically. There's several different ways of doing that.
Yeah.
That's why we see people like on the victim perpetrator side of things around the same event, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah.
So people are running around paying back their karma and don't know it in various ways. Their life is not so great. They may have a series of obstacles, never get going well with a career, or their relationships keep falling apart. That could be a karmic pattern that started in other lifetimes where they were harsh to people around them. And now in subsequent lives, they're not that same kind of manifestation, but they still can't kindle love in others, and this is a kind of a payback going on, just as an example.
Right. Right.
So we're always running into this. There's consequences for everything you do and everything you do not do.
Yeah.
So we're trying to spread the knowledge. Everyone has a responsibility here for the healing and saving of humanity. I'm not going to do it by myself,
right,
nor with Denny's help. We need many more taking part and joining in this quest.
Okay.
So information acquisition is a part of it.
Okay.
Because that provides a motivation then with greater understanding. And one of the problems with the channelers, just to finish this point, is a deliberate strategy they are using is to see differing stories. And they don't always jive. That might look too sinister. Why is it they all come up with this same weird scenario?
Yeah.
They come up with a lot of differing weird scenarios. And what that means then is you can't really trust any of them because they don't agree with one another. So who's to say one's right and another isn't?
Yeah. Or makes
it confusing.
And another problem is that you see, especially in that realm, a lot of they wouldn't necessarily think of it this way, but it's cherry picking, and it becomes a consensus type endeavor. So they'll go around and they go, well, this one said this, and this one said this, and this one said this. So there's now I've got 6 people saying the same thing about this one topic. That must be true. And there's 10 people saying, 10 channelers saying this about this other topic here. So that must be true. So they kind of build this reality based on a preponderance of testimony, if you will. And so, a lie can be spread widely, but it's still a lie. So that's the problem with the consensus reality. We actually asked a question about that when you channeled, I think it was Sylvia Brown, and talked about that. What is the problem with this idea of consensus reality? And you alluded to that too, with this whole idea of ascension and love and light, and all the channelers are saying that. Well, it must be true.
Yeah. Well, and the other problem is separating the wheat from the chaff. The 90% of the information coming from the channelers being true, at least in a general way.
Yeah.
So, for example, the ascension is Creator's plan, ultimately, for humanity.
Yeah.
The wrinkle is it's not going to happen unless we heal ourselves first and get ready. And we cannot heal until we deal with the problem of evil that's right in our way.
Right.
And they are making us unwell. They are making us corrupted and defective through all their manipulations. We have to heal them to get them off our neck. And then we can heal. Then we'll have a beautiful ascension one day. Yeah,
the ascension is down the road.
But it's down the road.
Yeah.
So people tuning in can see that, looking into the future. And the disinformation is they're told, oh, it's coming soon.
Yeah.
And you're ready now. And, everyone who follows you as a channeler will be moving into ascension mode and blah, blah, blah. And they feel wonderful. And they're offering this wonderful new thing to their acolytes.
Yeah,
and
which unfortunately just
good.
Turns into another form of apathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I come along, I'm the burr under the saddle, and I look like the evil and the dark one because I'm talking about these dark things. Well, sorry, but there is evil out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even the Bible was right about that.
Yeah.
And the Bible was a whistleblowing document about the problem of evil.
Yeah. Right now, we don't have to walk very far to see it in on display. And that's probably true for just about anywhere on the planet right now. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think this has been a really good introduction for viewer questions for Creator. Kind of sets the stage nicely for what we're doing here, and hopefully this will help our viewers as we go through these questions with Creator. So, if you're ready, Karl.
I'm depressed right now.
No.
Talked about all that ugliness.
Wait until we hear from Creator, then we'll really be depressed.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, he's going to tell us the truth first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. We get the bitter pill.
Yeah. Like like I said, dinner then dessert.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're ready, Carl, let's go ahead and start.
All right. So I'll take my few moments to connect and request safety around the work. Very, very important. I do all my channeling through the creator of all that is. And of course, I'm going to talk with creator now. I'm not always doing that. I talk to many different subjects. But if other channelers could do this while believing in the divine, not all the channelers believe in the divine. They have a kind of new age godless sort of spirituality, and it's empty. I'm sorry, they're just in a vacuum of their own creation, and they're fooling themselves and denying themselves something very, very important and central to their own existence and their own future, if it's to be a good one. So, all right, enough on that. I will connect, and then creator will let you know when it is here.
Okay.
This is Source Creator speaking.
Thank you for joining us. The Chinese coronavirus is spread as aerosols, not merely as droplet dispersion. Is this virus being distributed by chemtrails? The USA continues to be hit hard by chemtrails. Can the Lightworker Healing Protocol be modified to address exposure or elimination of chemtrails, at least in the USA, if not globally? And, finally, is the mainstream media being used to disinform the public about the severity of this pandemic?
These are all worthy questions because you are under attack with this global pandemic. The virus is unnatural. It is a bioweapon deliberately intended to kill human beings and was a laboratory creation of the extraterrestrial alliance that threatens you and runs the world in a dysfunctional fashion. You deserve to know this because in the knowing, you can take intelligent action to save yourselves and one another. Chemtrails are a real phenomena and a hazard, and being produced by the collaboration of the human military capability to fly and to disperse things into the atmosphere for a variety of purposes. The unfortunate reality is this is a cover for the widespread chemical and nanotechnological technologies that serve the extraterrestrial alliance and not human aims and goals. Chemtrails are therefore a menace used for introduction of chemical manipulations and mind control manipulations as well, because the nanoparticles act as a kind of transducer for subliminal messages used to subvert human thought, action, and feeling, to keep people constrained, to keep them complacent, and to program them in other ways with false beliefs, to disempower them, to misconstrue, misinterpret, and mishandle human difficulties. But the chemtrails per se are not being used to spread this virus. The reason is it is unnecessary. It can be spread through its ability to replicate within each human victim and then spread through contact to others in the environment. So it is, in a sense, a living thing that spreads on its own, unlike chemicals or nanoparticles that are inert and depend on wind currents and their introduction into the atmosphere to begin with to cover a wide area. So there must be a large scale, broad sweep to infest every human being with passive devices of these kinds. Whereas a biological organism need only be introduced here and there with small groups of people. And then, because they will become infected and vectors for the virus, it will spread widely from those original centers of introduction. That is slow in evolving and happens in fits and starts through happenstance to some degree. But the original seeding was orchestrated to happen, and so is no longer containable within a region or even a continent. A global shutdown in transportation and travel would not have prevented this, because it was essentially dispersed through human hands, acting as minions for the extraterrestrials. That is necessary to preserve the illusion of a true natural assumed epidemic, an act of nature, a mysterious evolution of a virus, presumably from animal origins, that becomes pathogenic to human, and then with a chance exposure between human and animal starts the chain of infection going in the human community. This, of course, begs the question, how did those viruses emerge in animals? So there is circular reasoning going on here. All of these viruses are unnatural. None of them evolved within nature. The earth has been targeted by viruses and bacterial species of extraterrestrial origin all through the ages. None are natural, because all are non-divine. The earth was not created to punish humans with scourges and oppressive beings that seek to dominate and kill them. This is a widespread assumption, because the earth is filled with scourges and many dangerous animals, plants, insects, and microbial life. None of that is natural. Not even the violence of nature is natural. It is orchestrated and ginned up to capitalize on energy through natural forces to wreak havoc on the human community. The ability of the virus to move about is simply a characteristic of its intended action to seek receptors in living cells and then hijack the replication machinery within the cell to propagate itself, and then kill the host cell and spread systemically and be shed into the environment as a vector to infect new humans. This is entirely sinister and artificial in its origin, but devastating in its consequences. The reactions to the infection on the part of governmental officials, and shaped as well by their image in the media, and the media as the presumed watchdog and spokesperson for the average person, asking penetrating questions and questioning public policy and so on, has all been entirely manipulated through mind control of the players themselves, the members in the media, their management, and those in government at highest levels, in particular, who are the spokespersons and the leaders who establish policy and make approvals or reject recommendations, are always under the thumb of the extraterrestrial alliance to maintain an orderly progression of things, to help or hurt the human family. There are many missteps, many misguided notions embraced and promulgated in official pronouncements until reality intrudes and forces a rethinking and a retrenchment. And then new policies and suggestions will be broadcast. And people will be complacent to the evolving story and will not look back and question what was said previously. The furor about this virus in particular, if you compare it to other epidemics, has been unprecedented and excessive in contrast. This is intentional. The initial accounts of its existence as an epidemic were dismissed, denied, and downgraded as being an important consideration from the very outset of its appearance. Public officials all around the world were uniformly reassuring, encouraging people to go out and about, attend public gatherings, and enjoy their lives, and minimizing the risks to any and all. This complacency was engineered to happen. And those public officials were saying what they were programmed to say. This was helpful in getting the epidemic started so that it could spread to a critical mass of victims to become comfortably self-propagating from that point on, and essentially unstoppable in terms of becoming a major threat. That is what was desired to happen by the powers that be. The excessive media attention to the point where people are questioning whether in fact it is a scam is in response to a manipulation that is quite real. This was overdone in terms of comparison to historical events of this kind, where the first response was not to shut down the economy and make people stay indoors and not venture forth in public at all, and greatly limit work being done and job attendance and loss of income being a casualty in the absence of an actual problem, but only the threat of one. This was unprecedented and was orchestrated to happen deliberately to produce that very eventuality, a financial collapse. So this was not only a bioweapon being launched as a scourge to kill many, many human beings, as many, in fact, as could be done, but also as a priority, cause an immediate financial downturn that would pressure economies globally and create economic chaos. This, of course, worsens everything because it will reduce the wherewithal to respond and cope with the real problem of treating and caring for the sick and providing the means to minimize the spread to those not yet infected and to deal with the aftermath in a supportive and effective fashion. There are many things still to be learned about the consequences of this particular pathogen. Not all has come to the foreground yet in terms of the legacy it will be bringing. But the intention here is to create maximum turmoil and maximum damage, both economically and physically, to impair health and cause death of as many people as possible with this particular go-round. It is one of many that have been launched through history. It is nothing new in that regard. What is new is the current climate with the intentions of the extraterrestrial alliance to make this a particularly painful episode in human history. This needs to be countered by human action to form a partnership with the divine realm. You cannot combat this on your own. You can only take steps to minimize the likelihood of your being infected and becoming a burden to others. That is a positive contribution in its own right. As you are needed, your energy is needed, your thoughts, your inner light, your divinity is needed. You have a say in what happens in your world. Most people are not making their desires known to the divine because they do not communicate with the divine. If they do not have that in their intention, all of their random thoughts, wishes, desires, and yearnings must be ignored by the divine realm because you truly are on your own and in charge of things. It is only when you reach out in earnest and partner with us directly with a direct request addressing us by name. Only then can we offer anything to you in the way of guidance, support, healing, or protection. Those able to pray effectively and use the Lightworker Healing Protocol that is designed in a way to maximize a divine response, to impart healing, are in a position to save the world here. The other measures of a prosaic sort are all well and good, but this is a holding action only. It cannot prevent another scourge from showing up in 6 months, a new variant with a different profile and set of risks that will not be recognizable by any vaccine made to the first invader. You need a long-term solution here. If you deal with the problem of evil, as a part of that, you can request for all harmful viruses to be removed summarily and immediately from any human being exposed. You can be a powerful force to minimize the magnitude of this scourge. There are a number of people making such requests. There need to be many more. Each one of you hearing these words can join the fight, become knowledgeable about the protocol and about effective prayer work for managing exogenous threats to human life and welfare. The workings of the extraterrestrial alliance can be more readily dealt with through the divine realm than even healing a sick person. And that is because you have sovereignty here and they do not. So that is weighted in your favor and not theirs in a contest of free will, of their wanting to harm you. If you are in ignorance and not asking for help, their free will choice will prevail, and you will be the loser. So in our perspective, the response of the media and their manipulations are doing as much harm as good. Nowhere are they proposing a divine partnership. There was a time when there would be a national call to pray from the government itself, and clerics would be brought in to set the example. And mass prayers would be done all around the nation and around the world as well. This is still being done in little pockets of true believers, but not as a national groundswell led from the top and participated in by the masses. If there were a return to that capability, the problems you're having of this kind would go away very quickly. We are doing the best we can with the ammunition you give us to use in this contest. But we're running low on ammunition. More is needed. Only you can provide it.
Okay, thank you. It has been stated in the It has been stated in the Adolf Hitler channeling, as well as others, that World War II was slated to be the final solution for the pesky humans on Earth. It was also stated that this was avoided because of many prayers with a resultant divine intervention. This would seem to go against Creator's statement that any killing is non-divine. World War II has always been characterized as the good war and that it was necessary to stop Hitler. Could you clear this up for us?